endless nothing where only the Xenos ever set foot. It was not truly silence, of course. It was the kind of quiet that came before something enormous, the stillness that settles over a battlefield in the seconds before the first blade is drawn. Two small figures sat upon their thrones of light, swinging their tiny feet over an abyss too vast for mortal comprehension, and for a long while neither of them spoke. Beyond the edges of that throne room, if it could even be called a room, there existed nothing that any mortal mind could properly categorize. No walls, no ceiling, no floor in any conventional sense, only an endless expanse of soft, pearlescent light that seemed to breathe in slow, ponderous waves, folding and unfolding at the very edge of perception. Occasionally, faint motes of color would drift past in the middle distance, each one, perhaps, an entire universe glimpsed from a vantage point no mortal eye was ever meant to witness. A reminder, subtle and ever-present, of just how much rested in the palms of these two small, restless beings. "I'm really bored," said one Xeno at last, his voice carrying the innocent boredom of a child, and yet beneath that childlike tone lived the terrifying weight of absolute power, the power to erase everything that existed with a single thought. "Me too. I'm really bored," echoed the other, his small legs dangling just the same, his eyes half-lidded with the exhaustion of eternity. For a being who could unmake reality on a whim, boredom was perhaps the most dangerous emotion of all. The multiverse itself seemed to hold its breath, as though sensing that whatever came next would ripple outward across every universe, every timeline, every fragile life, unaware of how closely its continued existence depended on the whims of two small entities who looked nothing more than curious, restless children. "Hey," the first Xeno said, sitting up a little straighter, a flicker of memory lighting his eyes. "Do you remember the Tournament of Power, the one from 5 years ago?" The other's face lit instantly, the boredom evaporating like morning mist under a rising sun. "Yeah, it was so much fun watching so many battles happen all at once." He clapped his small hands together, and somewhere in some universe, stars trembled at the motion. "Yeah, I think the same," the first Xeno murmured, nodding slowly, savoring the memory, the crashing energy, the screaming crowds of gods and angels, the impossible spectacle of mortals fighting for the very right of their universes to continue existing. "That's why I was thinking about holding a second Tournament of Power." The words hung in that empty void like the tolling of some cosmic bell. A second Tournament of Power. The declaration alone was enough to set countless futures trembling, though none of the mortals across the 12 universes yet knew that their fates had, in that instant, already begun to shift. The second Xeno's eyes went wide, delight spreading across his small face like sunrise breaking over a mountain range. "That's an excellent idea. We have to repeat that tournament as soon as possible." Beside the two Omni-Kings, the Grand Priest, tall, statuesque, his expression carved from something more ancient than patience itself, inclined his head, already anticipating the flurry of instructions to come. A faint smile, more courteous than genuine, touched his lips. "Hey, hey," the first Xeno called out, and though there was no visible communication device, no visible summons, his voice reached across dimensions instantly, threading itself into the mind of a certain angel currently standing beside a certain god of destruction on a distant, tranquil planet. "Yes, he called me," came the murmured reply somewhere far away, and the wheels of fate groaned as they began, once more, to turn. "We want to hold a second tournament," the Xeno declared, swinging his legs with renewed energy. "Yes, we want to do it as soon as possible. Yes." Far away, a god of destruction's ears would soon perk with alarm at this news, but for now, in that boundless nothing beyond all universes, the two small kings simply grinned at each other, already imagining the battles to come, battles they could not possibly comprehend the true cost of. The Grand Priest studied his masters for a long moment, weighing the implications with the practiced calm of someone who had served since the birth of everything. At last he allowed himself to speak. "I think it's a magnificent idea," Dai said, his tone measured, respectful, yet carrying an unmistakable undertone of genuine interest. He paused, his gaze drifting outward, as though he could see through the fabric of existence itself, to the 12 universes scattered like jewels across the void. "Surely everyone who participated has become much stronger," he continued. "It will be more than exciting to see the progress they've made these past years." Then, with the faintest edge of curiosity, perhaps even anticipation, he turned back to his masters and asked the question that would set the entire cataclysm in motion. "As for which universes will be eliminated this time, do you have anything in mind for this occasion?" The two Xenos exchanged a look, mischief sparkling in their eyes, and somewhere in Universe 7, a god of destruction shivered without knowing why. On Beerus's planet, far from the cosmic council chambers where fate itself was being reshaped, the ground trembled beneath the fury of two warriors locked in a battle that defied mortal comprehension. The sky above that tranquil world, normally the color of soft lavender twilight, dotted with slow drifting clouds, had turned a violent shade of crimson and gold, torn apart by shock waves that rippled outward like ripples on a pond struck by a falling star. Rock formations that had stood undisturbed for centuries cracked and split, sheared clean in half by pressure waves that carried no visible attack, merely the sheer, suffocating weight of two godlike wills colliding. At the center of this maelstrom stood Goku, his body wreathed in a silver-white aura that pulsed like a living heartbeat, flowing and rippling with a serenity that belied the impossible speed at which he moved. His eyes, calm and silver, tracked every micro-movement of his opponent with an almost supernatural detachment, the hallmark of ultra instinct, a state where the body reacted faster than conscious thought could ever hope to follow. Opposite him, Vegeta blazed like a dying star given human form, his aura a violent shade of magenta red, crackling with barely restrained fury. Every muscle in his body seemed carved from tension itself, cracks of dark energy licking across his skin like lightning trapped beneath flesh. This was ultra ego, not a state of peace, but a philosophy of destruction, a power that fed and grew stronger the more punishment its wielder endured. "Is that all you've got, Kakarot?" Vegeta snarled, his voice carrying over the roar of clashing energy, a savage grin splitting his face as he weathered a barrage of strikes that would have shattered planets. Each blow that connected against his guard sent a visible ripple of dark energy outward, absorbed hungrily into his very being, fueling the inferno within him. Goku said nothing at first, a slight knowing smile the only answer he gave, and simply shifted, his form blurring into afterimages that peeled away from reality itself as he closed the distance in a heartbeat that felt to any onlooker like an eternity stretched impossibly thin. They collided again, fists meeting in an explosion of raw force that sent shock waves rippling across the barren landscape, uprooting boulders the size of mountains and hurling them into the stratosphere like pebbles cast by a careless child. The sound of the impact came a full second later, a thunderous crack that split the silence of the planet like the very fabric of reality, tearing at the seams. Time itself seemed to stutter in that instant. For the briefest fraction of a heartbeat, both warriors hung suspended in the air, fists locked against each other, matched perfectly in power, in speed, in sheer indomitable will. Goku's expression remained serene, untouched by strain, his silver eyes calmly measuring the pressure bearing down upon him. Vegeta's face, by contrast, twisted into something between agony and ecstasy, pain transmuted instantly into raw fuel, fueling the inferno of his transformation. Then, in a blur too fast for the naked eye to follow, Goku shifted his weight, redirecting the force of the clash with impossible precision, sliding past Vegeta's guard like water, finding the smallest crack in stone. His counter came not as a punch, but as an open palm strike aimed squarely at the prince's ribs, a blow calculated not to end the fight, but to test, to probe, to force yet another reaction.
distraction from his rival.
Vegeta's body absorbed the strike with a guttural roar, dark energy erupting from the point of impact like blood from a wound, and rather than stumbling back in pain, he surged forward faster than before, his aura flaring violently as the damage fed directly into his growing power. "That's it," Vegeta growled through gritted teeth, his eyes practically glowing with manic intensity. Hit me as hard as you can, Kakarot. Every scar you leave on me becomes a weapon in my hands." Goku's brow furrowed slightly, not with concern, but with the quiet thrill of genuine challenge, a feeling he had chased his entire life and rarely found in such abundance. "You've really outdone yourself this time, Vegeta," he admitted, his voice calm despite the chaos surrounding them. "Then don't hold back," Vegeta roared, launching himself forward in a blur of magenta light. What followed was a battle that would have, in any lesser universe, torn apart the very planet beneath their feet. Punches and kicks flew faster than sound could carry, each blow accompanied by shockwaves that rippled outward in visible rings of distorted air, cracking the ground into deep fissures, sending mountains of dust and debris spiraling into a sky that had long since abandoned any semblance of natural color. Every clash of fists produced miniature explosions of pure kinetic force, flashes of white and crimson light strobing across the battlefield like lightning without thunder, though the thunder, delayed as it was always by the sheer speed of their movements, followed a fraction of a second later in booming cracks that echoed across the barren landscape. Goku wove between strikes with the fluid grace of water finding its path down a mountain, his silver aura flickering and shifting like candlelight in wind, never quite touching the ground as he danced along the very edge of Vegeta's fury. Each dodge was so precise, so impossibly timed, that it seemed less like combat and more like a performance, a dance choreographed between two masters who had spent their entire lives preparing for this single perfect moment. Vegeta, in stark contrast, embraced every strike that found its mark, his body drinking in pain like a plant drinking sunlight, growing more radiant and more terrible with each passing second. Cracks of dark, crackling energy spread across his skin in intricate patterns, like lightning frozen mid-strike, and his magenta aura swelled larger and larger, licking at the disturbed air around him like flames devouring dry timber. From a nearby ridge, watching this spectacle unfold with wide, fascinated eyes, stood Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan, a being whose sheer power had once been feared across the cosmos as an unstoppable force of destruction. And yet even he, a warrior who had weathered battles beyond mortal reckoning, found himself utterly transfixed by the display before him. His arms were crossed over his massive chest, his usually stoic expression softened by something that, on any other face, might be called childlike wonder. He had spent 5 years growing in strength and understanding beside these two rivals, and still, every single time they clashed like this, he found something new to marvel at. Incredible, Broly thought, his dark eyes following every movement with rapt attention. Both of them are incredible. He watched as Goku slipped through another devastating combination, his silver aura barely rippling despite the force bearing down on him, and as Vegeta absorbed blow after blow, transmuting agony into an ever-rising tide of destructive power. It was a philosophy of combat entirely foreign to Broly's own instincts. Where he simply became stronger the angrier he grew, these two had refined their paths into something far more deliberate, far more calculated, even in the eye of the storm. 5 years. It had been 5 years since the Tournament of Power had nearly claimed everything. 5 years of relentless training, of pushing bodies and souls past every limit previously thought immutable. And in that time, both Saiyans had achieved something almost unthinkable. They now stood shoulder to shoulder with the very gods of destruction, their power rivaling, perhaps even threatening to surpass, beings who had once been considered untouchable pillars of cosmic order. Broly himself had changed a great deal in those same 5 years, though few outside this small circle would ever know it. Where once his existence had been defined almost entirely by uncontrollable rage, a legendary
legendary, terrifying power that surged whenever his emotions spiraled beyond his own control. He had since learned, under the patient guidance of these two rivals and the world they'd welcomed him into, to temper that fury into something closer to discipline. He no longer needed anger to reach for his full strength. He had simply grown, the old wounds of isolation and betrayal slowly giving way to something he had never truly known before, belonging. And it was that hard-won stability that now allowed him to stand at the edge of this battlefield, watching two friends spar at a level that would have once terrified him into blind, destructive fury, and instead feel nothing but genuine, quiet awe. Goku's mastery of Ultra Instinct had reached a level of refinement that bordered on the supernatural. No longer did he need to consciously invoke the state and hope his body would catch up. Now his instincts and his conscious will moved as one, seamlessly, without the faintest hesitation. Every dodge was executed a fraction of a second before an attack even fully formed, every counter delivered with a precision that seemed to defy the laws of probability itself. He had become, in every sense of the word, untouchable, a phantom that could be seen but never quite struck. Vegeta's path could not have been more different, and yet it was equally devastating in its own right. Ultra Ego had transformed him into something that thrived on destruction, on pain, on the raw crucible of combat itself. Where Goku sought to avoid all harm, Vegeta welcomed it, using every wound, every scar, every ounce of suffering as fuel to an ever-escalating storm of power. His body had grown far more resilient, capable of shrugging off strikes that would have shattered stone, and with each new injury absorbed, his aura burned brighter, hungrier, more terrible to behold. There was something almost meditative in the violence of it, Broly had come to realize over the years of watching these two spar. Vegeta did not fight to avoid pain the way most warriors instinctively did. He fought to invite it, to court it deliberately, treating every collision as a kind of ritual sacrifice offered up to his own relentless will to surpass every limitation ever placed upon him, whether by nature, by circumstance, or by the shadow of the rivals standing across from him. It was pride transmuted into philosophy, ego reforged into a weapon sharp enough to threaten gods, and in its own brutal, unyielding way, it was every bit as beautiful as the effortless grace Goku wielded in answer to it. Two men, Broly mused silently, watching the twin auras collide once more in a blinding flash of silver and magenta light, walking paths that could not be more opposite, and yet somehow their rivalry burns exactly the same. It was, he realized, almost poetic, where Goku found strength in perfect harmony with the world around him, bending and flowing like water around every obstacle. Vegeta found his strength in defiant opposition, standing firm against every blow and turning suffering itself into a weapon. Two philosophies, diametrically opposed, and yet both had led these two Saiyans to power that could now, without exaggeration, be measured against gods. The battle raged on, cratering the landscape further with every exchange, the sky above flickering with the afterimages of attacks too fast for the human eye to fully process. Somewhere in the distance, tectonic plates groaned under the pressure of shockwaves rippling through the planet's crust, and yet Beerus's world, sturdy, ancient, accustomed to hosting battles of unimaginable scale, held firm, weathering the storm as it always had. Then, without warning, both warriors froze mid-motion, fists inches from each other's faces, energy crackling violently between them like static before a lightning strike. Vegeta's eyes narrowed. What's wrong, Kakarot? Losing focus? But Goku wasn't looking at him. His silver eyes had drifted skyward, toward the distant silhouette of Beerus's modest home, where the god of destruction himself had gone rigid, one hand pressed to his temple, as though listening to some distant, urgent call. "Something's happening," Goku murmured, lowering his fists slowly. His silver glow of his aura dimmed, retreating back into the calm surface of his usual base form, though the the readiness in his stance never fully left him. Vegeta, too, allowed his transformation to recede, the crackling magenta light fading into embers before disappearing entirely, leaving behind only the faint echo of restrained power simmering beneath his skin. "Whatever it is," Vegeta muttered, turning his gaze toward Beerus's house as well. "It had better be good. We were in the middle of something." Whis was beside Beerus with the serene composure that seemed permanently etched into his very being, his staff resting gently in one hand as his other pressed lightly to his temple, listening to a voice that reached him across dimensions few mortals could ever hope to perceive.
The god of destruction watched his angel attendant with mounting unease, his tail flicking anxiously behind him, every fiber of his being attuned to the subtle shift in atmosphere that had settled over the once tranquil planet. He had felt it the moment the summons arrived, a ripple in the fabric of existence itself, subtle but unmistakable, like the first tremor before an earthquake. It was a feeling he knew all too well, one that lived permanently coiled somewhere beneath his ribs, ever since the last tournament of power had nearly erased his entire universe from existence. 5 years of relative peace had done little to dull that particular scar. Every unexpected summons, every unscheduled visit from the Grand Priest, every faint tremor in the celestial hierarchy sent that same old dread clawing back up from wherever he'd tried to bury it. And this, a simultaneous summons of all 12 angels, was about as unscheduled and unprecedented as things could possibly get. "The Grand Priest," Whis said at last, his tone carrying the faintest note of surprise, "is requesting the presence of all 12 angels at Lord Zeno's palace." The words hit Beerus like a physical blow. His golden eyes went wide, his already tense posture snapping rigid with something approaching genuine alarm. All 12 angels summoned simultaneously. Such a thing had happened only once before in recent memory, and the mere thought of it dredged up memories that made his blood run cold. Slowly, deliberately, the god of destruction turned his gaze toward Goku, the Saiyan raised on Earth, the perpetual catalyst for so much of the chaos that had befallen his universe over the years, his expression a carefully controlled mixture of suspicion and dread. "Don't tell me," Beerus said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is your doing." Goku blinked, genuinely taken aback by the accusation, raising both hands defensively. "I have nothing to do with it. I've been training this whole time, right here in this place. You've been literally watching me the entire time, Beerus." The god of destruction's eye twitched, torn between the obvious truth of that statement and his deeply ingrained instinct to blame Goku for absolutely everything that ever went wrong in the universe. After a tense moment, he exhaled sharply through his nose, waving a dismissive hand. "Whatever," he grumbled, turning back toward his angel. "You'd better hurry, Whis. Zeno might get upset if you don't arrive as soon as possible." Whis offered a small, knowing smile, inclining his head slightly. "Of course, my lord." Before that shift in atmosphere had fully settled, the battle beneath the ridge had already reached a peak fever that seemed to defy the very concept of escalation. Goku's silver aura flared brighter, condensing into something almost crystalline, each strand of energy moving with the deliberate calm of still water, even as his body blurred across the cratered battlefield faster than thought itself. Vegeta matched him blow for blow, his magenta aura pulsing like a heartbeat gone feral, every absorbed strike compounding into a storm that seemed ready at any moment to consume the sky itself. A feint from Goku, a subtle dip of the shoulder, barely perceptible even to a trained eye, drew Vegeta's guard a fraction too wide, and in that sliver of an opening, the Earth-raised Saiyan unleashed a flurry of strikes so rapid they registered not as individual blows, but as a single continuous wave of pressure, hammering against Vegeta's forearms in a rhythm too fast for sound to properly keep pace with. Each impact cracked the air like the report of 1,000 simultaneous gunshots, compressed into a blur of motion that left afterimages hanging translucent in the space where the prince had stood a heartbeat before. Vegeta roared through the assault, planting his feet against the trembling earth, forcing his stance to hold even as fissures spread outward beneath him, swallowing boulders whole into freshly opened chasms. Dark, crackling energy licked up his arms with each each absorbed strike, feeding directly into the inferno building at his core, until at last he exploded outward in a counter so violent it tore the very clouds above into ribbons, scattering vapor and ash across the reddened sky in spiraling arcs. Goku met that counter head-on, refusing to yield an inch, his silver eyes tracking the incoming force with perfect, unbroken serenity, even as the shockwave threatened to peel the flesh from his bones. Fist met fist in an explosion of light so blinding that for a fraction of a second the entire planet seemed bathed in twin colors, silver and magenta bleeding together into something that resembled the birth of a dying star. The resulting detonation carved a crater half a kilometer wide into the planet's crust, sending a column of dust and shattered stone rocketing into the stratosphere, visible even from the god of destruction's modest dwelling in the distance. For a long moment, neither combatant moved, both suspended in the settling haze, chests heaving, auras flickering at the edges like candle flames buffeted by wind. "You're getting sloppy, Kakarot," Vegeta rasped, though the manic grin plastered across his face betrayed just how much he was relishing every second of this exchange. "Or are you finally starting to feel it, the years I've spent catching up to you?" Goku wiped a thin trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth, laughing softly despite the exhaustion clearly beginning to gnaw at the edges of his usually boundless stamina. "Maybe a little," he admitted, settling back into a loose, ready stance. "But I'm not done yet, not even close." It was in the charged silence following that exchange, both warriors gathering themselves for what promised to be an even more devastating clash, that the subtle ripple in the cosmic fabric finally reached them, an invisible current of unease sweeping down from the god of destruction's modest home and settling like a shroud over the cratered battlefield below. Vegeta, standing a short distance away with his arms crossed, allowed a rare flicker of genuine curiosity to cross his otherwise stern features. What could possibly warrant summoning every angel across all 12 universes at once, he wondered silently, his mind already racing through possibilities, each more troubling than the last. Goku, meanwhile, stepped forward, an eager glint in his eye, the same glint that had time and time again led him headlong into situations of unimaginable danger, with nothing but boundless enthusiasm to guide him. "Hey, want me to go find the Supreme Kais and take you to Zeno's palace myself? I could use instant transmission and have you there in no time." Whis chuckled softly, the sound light and melodic, utterly unbothered by the chaos rippling around him. "That's very kind of you, Goku, but it won't be necessary," he said with a gentle smile. "For this kind of summons, the Grand Priest transports all of the angels directly to the palace simultaneously. There's no need for intermediaries." As if to punctuate his words, a brilliant ethereal glow began to manifest around the angel's form, shimmering like captured starlight, wrapping around him in delicate swirling patterns that seemed to pull at the very threads of reality. Beerus took an instinctive step back, watching with an expression that mixed reverence and unease in equal measure. "I am ready to go to the palace," Whis announced calmly, his tranquil demeanor unshaken even as the light around him intensified, growing brighter and brighter until it consumed his entire form. And then, in the span of a single heartbeat, he was gone, vanished completely, leaving behind nothing but a faint shimmer in the air where he had once stood, and an unsettling silence that pressed down upon the god of destruction's planet like a physical weight. Beerus stared at the empty space for a long moment, his tail twitching anxiously before letting out a long, uneasy breath. Goku and Vegeta exchanged a glance, one of curiosity, the other of poorly concealed apprehension, and even Broly, watching from his perch atop a nearby ridge, felt a strange chill settle over him, though he could not quite place why. Hours passed in tense, uncertain silence. The training that had consumed the two Saiyans just moments before felt suddenly trivial, forgotten entirely in the face of the unknown. Beerus paced back and forth across the cracked, scorched earth of his own planet, his golden eyes flicking repeatedly toward the horizon, waiting for any sign of his angel's return. Then, without warning, the same brilliant glow that had swallowed Whis whole reappeared, shimmering into existence at the edge of the battlefield, and from within its radiant folds emerged the tall, elegant figure of the angel himself, his expression carrying the faintest hint of something Beerus had rarely, if ever, seen on his attendant's face: genuine concern. "Whis has returned," Goku exclaimed, practically bounding toward the angel with the enthusiasm of a child greeting a long-lost friend, though in truth barely a few hours had passed. Whis offered a polite nod, though his usual carefree smile seemed just a touch more strained than usual. Indeed, the Grand Priest was quite efficient with his briefing this time. Beerus, never one to hold back his impatience, closed the distance in a few brisk strides, his voice edged with barely restrained anxiety. "Well, what happened at the palace? What did the Grand Priest want?" For a moment, Whis hesitated, an almost imperceptible pause, but one that did not escape the God of Destruction's keen senses. Then, choosing his words with the deliberate care of someone about to detonate a bomb in a crowded room, the angel spoke. "There is going to be a new tournament of power," he said simply. "It will take place in a few days, similar in structure to the last one." The words landed like a thunderclap. Beerus, standing closest, caught every syllable with perfect clarity, his blood running cold as the implications crashed over him all at once. But it was Goku and Vegeta's reactions that filled the silence that followed, reactions that could not have been more different from the God of Destruction's own mounting horror. "That's wonderful!" Goku exclaimed, his face lighting up with unrestrained joy, practically vibrating with excitement at the mere prospect of facing new, powerful opponents. It was, in many ways, exactly the reaction one would expect from a man who had spent his entire life chasing the thrill of a worthy fight, heedless of the terrifying stakes that so often accompanied such tournaments. Broly, who had wandered closer upon sensing the shift in the group's energy, tilted his head slightly, a flicker of genuine intrigue crossing his features. "A tournament?" he asked, his deep voice carrying a note of curiosity rarely heard from the towering Saiyan. "Are you talking about that one they told me about before? The one where all the universes fought?" Whis, despite the gravity clearly weighing on his mind, could not help the slightly exasperated look that crossed his face at the two Saiyans' enthusiasm. "How in the world can you two possibly be happy about something like this?" He turned toward Beerus, his expression sobering considerably. "Lord Beerus, I must ask, do you understand what this could mean? Are the universes once again in danger of being erased by the Omni-Kings?" The question hung in the air like a blade suspended by a single thread, and for a long, agonizing moment, nobody spoke. Whis drew a slow breath, gathering the full weight of what he had learned at Zeno's palace, and began to relay the Grand Priest's message in full. "The Grand Priest announced that a second tournament of power will indeed be held. However, there are several key differences that distinguish this tournament from the one held 5 years ago. For one, the penalty of elimination by the Omni-King's hand will no longer apply." A visible wave of relief swept over Beerus's features, his shoulders sagging as though a crushing weight had been lifted from them in an instant. He let out a long, shuddering breath, his tail curling contentedly behind him. "Thank the stars," Beerus muttered, running a trembling hand over his face. "For a moment there, I thought we were about to relive that nightmare all over again." But Whis' expression did not soften to match his master's relief. If anything, a subtle tightness remained around his eyes, the look of someone holding back news they knew would land far less gently. "There is more," the angel continued, and something in his tone made even Goku's boundless enthusiasm falter for just a moment. "There is another new feature of this tournament. It is that all 12 universes will participate this time, including those that did not participate in the previous tournament." Beerus blinked, confusion momentarily overriding his lingering unease. "All 12? But surely that includes..." "Including the presence of the
ancestrals, Whis finished, his voice quiet, almost solemn. The god of destruction's entire body went rigid, his golden eyes widening to an almost comical degree, his tail freezing mid-swish, as though every muscle in his body had simultaneously locked in place. "What?" he said, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. "Did you just say?" "The ancestrals," Whis repeated, watching his master's reaction with quiet, careful attention, "from universes 1, 5, 8, and 12 will also participate." Goku's eyes lit up with unmistakable curiosity, his head tilting slightly as he processed this new piece of information, entirely missing the depth of the reaction unfolding in front of him. "Ancestrals?" he asked, glancing between Whis and the visibly shaken god of destruction. "They sound like they must be pretty powerful beings, huh? What are they exactly?" Whis allowed himself a small, measured breath before answering, his gaze drifting briefly toward the horizon, as though gathering his thoughts from some distant memory. "Allow me to explain. The ancestrals, as their name suggests, are beings who existed at the very beginning of the creation of each of their respective universes. They predate even the first generation of the 12 gods of destruction. Their power, therefore, exists on a scale that not even Lord Beerus himself could fully imagine." Beerus made a strangled sound in the back of his throat, somewhere between a gasp and a whimper, but said nothing, too stunned to formulate a coherent response. According to the Grand Priest's account, Lord Zeno requested this second tournament of power specifically to compare the progress mortals have made in these past 5 years against the peak power of those universes that did not participate in the previous tournament. And I must say,
He paused, his gaze settling meaningfully on Goku. "We were exceedingly fortunate that those universes did not participate the first time. Had they done so, not even with ultra instinct at your command would you have stood the slightest chance of victory." The words settled over the group like a physical weight, and even Vegeta, who had remained silent through most of the exchange, arms crossed, expression unreadable, felt a chill run down his spine at the sheer magnitude of what was being described. "Wait a moment," Vegeta said suddenly, his sharp mind already working through the implications, piecing together a question that had clearly been forming since the mention of the ancestrals. "If these beings truly existed at the dawn of creation for each universe, then what happened to Universe 7's ancestral?" Whis turned toward the Saiyan prince, a faint, almost proud smile touching his lips. "As always, you have a keen eye for these sorts of details," he said. "If I recall correctly, the ancestral representing Universe 7 was named Sun Wukong. However, he no longer exists in this world. He passed away eons ago." A strange, heavy silence followed that revelation. Goku's brow furrowed thoughtfully, something almost wistful crossing his features at the mention of a name so similar to his own, the legendary name from which his own had been drawn, a name whispered through legends far older than he could ever hope to trace. But that quiet contemplation didn't last long. Within moments, the fire of excitement reignited in his eyes, burning brighter than ever before. "Man, I can't wait to fight beings like that," he exclaimed, practically bouncing on the balls of his feet, his enthusiasm utterly unshaken by the magnitude of what he had just learned. Beside him, Vegeta felt a similar spark ignite within his chest, though he masked it beneath his usual stoic determination. "Finally," the prince muttered, cracking his knuckles, a savage grin slowly spreading across his face. He glanced toward Goku, eyes gleaming with fierce anticipation. "I want to see how much those bastards have progressed, and this time I will be the one who wins." Beerus watched the two Saiyans with a mixture of exasperation and reluctant relief, letting out another slow breath. At the very least, he reasoned, the universes wouldn't disappear this time. That singular fact allowed him to watch the coming battles without the constant gnawing fear of annihilation hovering over every moment. "It will certainly be an interesting battle to watch without having to fear for my own existence for once." But Whis was not finished. He raised his hand slightly, drawing everyone's attention back to him, his expression sobering once more. "I haven't given you all the information yet," he said quietly. The mood in the group shifted instantly, the earlier excitement dimming into wary silence. "The rule condemning losing universes to elimination will not apply this time."
Whis continued, his voice carrying an unmistakable weight. "However, participants will now be allowed to kill their opponents without any consequences." The silence that followed was deafening. Goku's expression shifted rapidly from confusion to genuine alarm. "Wait, seriously?" he asked, his voice tight with disbelief. That's really messed up." Vegeta, meanwhile, had already begun processing the ramifications with the calculating precision that had defined him for decades, his jaw tightening as the full weight of the implications settled over him. "This," he muttered darkly, "might actually be worse than I expected." Goku turned toward him, brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean, Vegeta?" The Saiyan prince let out an exasperated breath, running a hand down his face as though physically restraining himself from smacking some sense into his rival. "Think about it, Kakarot. Now we can't count on the help of Earthlings with power levels as low as Krillin or the old martial artist. In the last tournament, the rule against killing allowed us to fight using our own skills without risking our lives outright, even against an overwhelming difference in power. But now," he shook his head grimly, "none of them will survive on their own. They'll just be a liability, a complete burden dragging down our entire team." The gravity of the situation crashed down over Goku all at once, his earlier enthusiasm tempered by the sobering reality of what this new tournament truly demanded. He rubbed the back of his neck, deep in thought, before looking back toward Whis. "So, how many participants will there be? 10, like last time?" Whis nodded. "Correct. The number of participants for each of the original participating universes will remain the same as before. The only exception applies to the 4 new universes joining for the first time." Goku exhaled heavily, pressing a hand to his forehead as he began mentally calculating the sheer difficulty of assembling a team strong enough to actually hold their own in a fight like this. "Man, this is going to be tough, finding 10 fighters strong enough to actually hold their own in a fight like this." It was then that his gaze drifted toward Broly, who stood nearby with an easy, confident smile spread across his broad features, entirely unfazed by the mounting tension in the group. "That won't be a problem at all," Broly said, his deep voice carrying a rare note of genuine assurance. "Over the past 5 years, we've met incredibly powerful people. I'm sure it won't be difficult to gather a team capable of fighting." He paused, tilting his head slightly. "When exactly does this tournament begin?" Whis considered for a moment. "Approximately 3 days from now, according to Earth's calendar." Goku nodded slowly, his mind already racing through the list of allies he intended to seek out. 3 days, he murmured. That should be more than enough time. But Vegeta's sharp mind had already caught on to another detail buried within Whis' earlier explanation, a detail that demanded immediate clarification. "Wait a moment, Whis," he said, holding up a hand. "You mentioned earlier that universes participating for the first time are excluded from the standard rule of 10 participants. That means their numbers will differ from the rest of us. How many fighters are we talking about exactly for universes 1, 5, 8, and 12? Whis' expression grew solemn once more. "They will each field only a single fighter as their representative," he said, "since their representatives are the ancestral beings themselves, entities of extraordinarily high power. Only one will participate per universe." Vegeta's eyes narrowed sharply. "Seriously, are these beings truly that powerful, that a single one of them is considered equivalent to an entire team of 10? "Indeed," Whis confirmed, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "Allow me to remind you both, these beings existed at the very dawn of creation for their respective universes. They are far older and far more powerful than any god of destruction currently in existence. It should go without saying, then, that if you cannot defeat Lord Beerus in combat," he let the implication hang unspoken but unmistakably clear, "you certainly stand no chance whatsoever against even a single one of them." The weight of that statement settled over the group like a physical force, crushing the last remnants of easy confidence from even the most battle-hardened among them. Goku's expression turned deeply thoughtful, the reality of the coming battle finally sinking in with full clarity. "Even if we lose," Goku said, slowly, almost to himself, "our defeat won't mean our universe gets erased this time, but there's still," he hesitated, his jaw tightening, "still the possibility of getting killed in combat." Then almost immediately, his expression brightened again, a familiar look of casual optimism returning to his face. "Well, I guess we could just use the Dragon Balls to bring everyone back afterward." He never finished the sentence. Vegeta's hand shot out, fisting tightly into the collar of Goku's gi, yanking him forward with a snarl of pure fury. "Are you already accepting defeat before we've even stepped foot in the arena?" the prince bellowed, his eyes blazing with indignant rage. "I ought to kill you myself right here, right now, before this tournament even begins." Goku, entirely unbothered by the murderous threat, merely blinked, and then slowly a wide, mischievous grin spread across his face. "Actually, that's a great idea."
The declaration hung in the air for a long, stunned moment before its full weight registered. Vegeta's grip on Goku's collar loosened slightly, his expression shifting from murderous rage to utter, bewildered confusion. "What?" the prince said slowly. "The hell are you talking about?" Beerus, standing nearby, blinked in equal confusion, while Whis merely raised an eyebrow with the patient curiosity of someone who had long since learned to expect the unexpected from this particular Saiyan. "If you kill me right now," Goku explained, entirely too cheerful for a man discussing his own imminent death, "I'll ask King Yemma and Zeno if I can keep my physical body in the afterlife. That way, I can train without any limits in the room of spirit and time, right up until the day of the tournament." Vegeta stared at him for a long moment, processing the sheer audacity of the plan, before something like reluctant admiration flickered across his features. "You want me to kill you," he said slowly, "so you can train in the afterlife without any physical limitations and then simply return in time for the tournament?" "Exactly," Goku beamed, as though he'd just solved the most obvious puzzle in the world. "Inside the room of spirit and time, 3 days out here would be roughly 3 years in there. Maybe a little less, since we still need time to recruit everyone for the team." Beerus, who had been listening to this entire exchange with growing bewilderment, suddenly barked out a short, incredulous laugh, shaking his head slowly. "It's a very abstract idea," it admitted, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "A kind of immortality while being dead. Ironic, given everything else about this tournament." He paused, considering the logic with genuine interest. "But if that's truly the case, it wouldn't be a bad idea to send you both there." Vegeta's grip on Goku's collar finally released entirely, and for a moment the Saiyan prince simply stood there, weighing the absurd proposition with the calculating precision that had defined every major decision of his life. Slowly, a fierce, determined light entered his eyes. "Fine," he said at last, his voice low and resolute. "If this is what it takes to guarantee victory, then so be it."
Thank you guys for watching this amazing video. If you like this story, please drop a like and subscribe for more Dragon Ball content. Your support keeps going on. And see you in the next one.